Roberto, se permetto puoi anche attaccare. Okay, so here we are, the last but not least conference of our seminar. On the contrary, we are arriving to the end by listening to somebody who will talk to us how everything began in technical terms, because I certainly will not commit the outrageous crime of Donald Trump, who still calls it the Chinese virus, no? Giving a national etiquette, a national label to something that is completely global, as if it was the fault of somebody. But in any case, it is very interesting for us to listen to Zhen. It is a great pleasure for us to have her with us. And I'm very grateful to Roberto Malighetti, who having been the person who succeeded in inviting Zhen for our seminar. So it is a great pleasure to have both of you here, Roberto moderating the meeting, the seminar, and Zhen telling us her point of view on the pandemic from China. The title of her conference is Fractal Borders and Communication in China During the COVID-19 Pandemic. As you probably know, Zhen, we have more or less 50 minutes, an hour for your presentation. Then we have 1 more hour, if we need it, to discuss a bit of what you told us. And at the end, the recording will be posted on the site of the Italian Society for Medical Anthropology. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Roberto, for inviting Zhen, who is talking to us from Göttingen in Germany, where she is a postdoctoral fellow in the Max Planck Institute and studying the religious and ethnic diversity. I will shut off my camera and my microphone. That's what I invite all of the public to do. Please shut off your cameras and your microphones. Then you can write your questions on, or ask to ask questions on the chat, so that Roberto may see who wants to ask the questions first. Thank you very much, Zhen. Roberto, you have the platform. Thank you. We don't hear you.
You have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Here I am. I just thank you, all of you, for your participation, and particularly Dr. Zhen for having accepted to present this draft of her reflections on the pandemic that went on in China. We all know how difficult it is to deal with this issue from an anthropological point of view. That is to say, not from abstract speculations, but from a perspective that necessarily is based on fieldwork. The time and the very quality of this phenomenon of investigation made this enterprise quite hard to carry on and obliged the researcher to use indirect and original sources of information. Indeed, Dr. Ma will base her talk on her personal experience. There is someone that should have the microphone, or Roberto that do it for us. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Indeed, I was saying Dr. Ma will base her talk on her personal experience when she was trapped in a hotel from January. It's impossible to talk. I was trying to say that Dr. Ma will base her talk on her personal experience when she was trapped in a hotel from January to June in Sichuanbana, South China, having left her fieldwork site in Myanmar to avoid to contaminate her interlocutors. As she will explain, she used three main sources. Interview from different members of the village committee, party members, friends and kins, Chinese social media equivalent to our, so to speak, Twitter, WhatsApp, or YouTube, and the analysis of some documents from the Chinese government, from the World Health Organization, and from various mainstream Western journals. So Dr. Ma will make a good use of her great experience of fieldwork. Started when she was a master's student in Yunnan, continued in her PhD research at the School of Ethnology and Sociology of the Medica University of China. It was on QRT and the relations between Chinese ethnic minorities and modernity in Southwest China. Her research interest covers Theravada Buddhist culture, material culture, and visual anthropology, with special reference to Southwest Chinese minorities, such as the Bulan, the Dai, the Wa, and the Bai. Now, as Professor Lupo mentioned, she is a postdoctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity in Göttingen, Germany. And she's currently working on a project dealing with transnational connections between Southwest China and Myanmar, with a focus on the two related issues of Theravada Buddhist networks and cross-border networks. She published in different international journals and made 5 ethnographic films, an instrument which I think she uses with particular skill. Her film, Living on Tea, was nominated for an award at the Beijing Ethnographic Film Festival in 2015. So I'm very glad she accepted to share with us this draft of her research. I'm glad of this, not only because she has been a brilliant doctoral student of mine at Windsor University, but above all, because she can offer us a vision surely alternative to the one provided by the Western embarrassing Cold War press, at times comics, but most of the time dramatic, at least different from the ideologically grotesque, apologetic perspectives of those media that, as we remember, promoted the need to search for weapons of mass destruction. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Dr. Ma for her lecture, which is entitled Fractal Borders and Communication in China during the COVID-19 pandemic. If there are questions or anything, please write it on the chat. Okay, please, Dr. Zhen.
Okay, thank you, Professor Manigetti, for your very kind and generous introduction, and thank you for all of you to attend my talk today. But I have to admit first that this is a little bit beyond my expertise because I didn't do any kind of research related to medical anthropology before. And I was not really interested in the pandemic of COVID-19 also in the first place. But it turned out to be such a important and strange kind of unforgettable experience I had during my field work in China. I was stuck in a hotel in Yunnan, in southwest China for 45 days. And I just also quarantined myself for another 2 weeks after I came back to Germany. My fieldwork was infected really tremendously, not only because I was stuck for a long time during my fieldwork, but also even after I got out from the hotel in early March. I couldn't not really travel along the Chinese along the Sino-Burmese border as I originally planned. When Professor Maligatti asked me whether I want to deliver this talk, I looked at my notebook and I realized that I actually already did lots of interviews and conversations, because I really tried very hard to understand the situation when I was in the hotel room alone. And I also tried very hard to figure out how to get out from the hotel and go back to the village when where I was doing field work before the outbreak. So another reason I also accept this invitation, because just as Professor Maligatti said, that I think I can maybe share something a little bit different from all the reports and articles we read on mainstream media, which are overwhelmingly about Chinese government and of course Donald Trump. But the experience of the vast majority of Chinese people actually remains unknown. So I will mainly focus on 4 interrelated issues. So first, how did both the government and the general public initially understand and responded to the disease? And second, what made the nationwide lockdown possible, and how did it actually feel to be quarantined in China during the critical days of the pandemic from the late January to early March? Third, how cyberspace, especially various social media, became the battlefield of knowledge, and how people use online media to respond to the authorities and create their own narrative with rumors, humor, anger, and in the end, pride. And finally, how did the tracking system work, and more importantly, how is this system embedded in the long-term digital infrastructure in the last decade in China? So if we can look back, the main issues for the Chinese government were actually trying to understand the virus on the one hand and deal with the information of the virus on the other hand. We can see that from the news and the report we know now that the Chinese government actually responded quickly, but the information was kept in a small scale, in a small circle in the beginning. So from December 27th to 31, the information will mainly remain locally only in Wuhan, where this pandemic first started. On December 27th, Hubei Province Hospital of Integrated Chinese and Western Medicine reported cases of pneumonia of unknown origin to the Wuhan Center of Disease Prevention and Control. And 3 days later, on December the 13th, the Wuhan Health Commission issued urgent notice on treatment of the patients with pneumonia of unknown cases. At the same time, the information and message of this unknown pneumonia was spread quietly in the WeChat groups of the local doctors in Wuhan. So WeChat is kind of Chinese equivalent of WhatsApp. The next day, on December the 31st, the Chinese National Health Commission sent a team consisting of officials and experts to guide Wuhan's response to the pneumonia. And on the same day, the Chinese official alerted the WHO. But even by then, both the Chinese government and the Hubei provincial government didn't publish the information of the virus to the Chinese people. So in other words, the WHO knew the outbreak earlier than most Chinese people. From January the 1st, 2020 to January 20th, the Chinese National the NHC sent 3 investigative teams to Wuhan and then began to trace the origin of the first coronavirus and updated information to the WHO. And then the WHO briefly announced a notice on its website about the virus on January the 5th. And from January the 4th, Chinese tabloids such as the Xinhua News reported the pneumonia. But I want to address that the general public didn't really pay any attention to the news because nobody would really read those state-owned newspapers. And even if one reads, several cases of pneumonia was just normal or not really a big deal. In the meanwhile, many research institutions, including Chinese CDC and Wuhan Institute of Virology, developed an early version of test kits. And changed the name of the illness from viral pneumonia of unknown cases to pneumonia caused by novel coronavirus. The second investigative team came to the conclusion that there were limited human-to-human transmission. I guess all of us have read many articles accusing that China reacted to snow. There are also some other facts may be helpful for us to think with. For example, it was just before the Lunar New Year and the most important festival for Chinese in China and beyond, because China also has become a very mobilized country. The vast majority of the Han people are literally all traveling. One of the most striking facts of the geographic location of Wuhan is that it is in central China. It is one of the most important business transportation hub of China, with 15 million residents and 4 million internal immigrants. Among all the people living in Wuhan, they probably have family ties all over the country. Another fact which hasn't got any attention it deserves is that Wuhan is the base of 21 colleges and universities, include 8 key universities of China. It was just the beginning of the winter vacation. The backflow of 200,000 students could also bring the virus to any corner of the country. Other very important things need also to look into deeply is that the employee of the scientific research by the government. I think both the authorities and the world of science need to think really very critically about what does science, especially the science of medical mean to a society. Evidence showed that the Chinese government didn't consider medical experts' warning carefully in late December and early January. I think all of us already read enough about that. And second, scientists should also consider their roles or their responsibility towards the society. So, for example, on January the 7th, Chinese research shared the 4 genetic sequence of the virus, but many of them remained silent. The first page about the virus was published on Lancet on January the 24th, with 29 names signed on it. It means that outside of the hospital in Wuhan, the scientists knew actually what was happening. It is clear that the government of Wuhan, the Wuhan CDC, the Chinese NHC, the Chinese CDC, and several institutions knew what was going on. And the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission also published the information on their website. But the general public was totally unaware of this from the late December to mid-January. And then the second stage of the virus in the early period of the outbreak was that the virus came to the public attention at the midnight of January the 20th. On the interview made by CCTV News Channel 13, Zhong Lanshan, a 94-year-old prominent respiratory specialist who was the leader of the Third Health Commission senior experts group, who was sent to Wuhan to investigate what was really the virus was, said that there were definitely evidence of a human-to-human transmission. Then the illness finally came to the attention of the public. So it was already January the 20th. The officially reported cases in Wuhan was 136, with several patients in critical condition. However, even if the public finally knew the virus, people actually continue their life as usual. So when I was in Mandalay, a city in central Myanmar, when I was exposed to this news, like most Chinese people, I actually wasn't aware the dangerousness of the virus. For the majority of the people who are not expert of virology, coronavirus or human-to-human transmission actually sound very confusing. The next day, I took the plane from Mandalay to Kunming. The international airport of Kunming was bustling, except for rolling broadcasting news of the pneumonia on all the TV sets of the airport. Life actually felt very normal. Only very few people were wearing face masks, and I even got a foot massage in the airport and talked with the masseuse for more than 1 hour when I was waiting for my collecting flight to Jinhong, the capital city of Xishuangbanna, where my fieldwork was mainly based. But by contrast, articles on the knowledge of virus, rumors about what was happening in Wuhan, interviews with the SARS survivors were overwhelmingly circulated in Chinese social media. So in my opinion, social media actually played a very important role in educating people. What does corona mean? What does human-to-human transmission mean? What should ordinary people do to protect themselves being infected? I read those articles in the airport and realized this virus actually is very similar with SARS. Then I realized this is something really very serious. So I took the plane, and then I arrived in the hotel of Jinhong, and I decided to wear a face mask and suggested the staff of the hotel to wear face masks because they came in contact with people from all over the country every day. But the boss of the hotel invited me to a cup of tea because he asked me not to create any fear and panic in his hotel. So I actually understand his concern because Jinhong is one of the most popular tourist destinations in China, with its subtropical climate, diverse ethnic cultures, and various delectable food. It is especially popular for people from northern China who want to escape the cold weather and celebrate Spring Festival during the vacation. At that time, his hotel was expecting its highest occupancy of the entire year. No staff of the hotel or any guest will wear any face mask, nor did the hotel disinfect any of its rooms or public spaces. So in the early days of the pandemic, one really needs lots of medical knowledge to realize how serious and dangerous the virus is. After the NHC and China CDC published the news that there were for sure human-to-human transmission, it was still very difficult for the general public to really make their decision. And considering the spread of the virus, I think for several reasons. First, Chinese New Year is not only marked by enormous population flow in dense groups, but also marked by an atmosphere of family gathering, leisure, natural, and relaxing. And most Chinese people actually schedule their trips, especially inter-cities and inter-provincial trips, at least half a month in advance. All the people I met and interviewed in the hotel I was staying were completely aware of the outbreak. But people knew the risk, but they decided to travel anyway. Statistics show that between the announcement of the existence of human-to-human transmission to January the 23rd, when Wuhan was completely locked down, around 5.5 million people left Wuhan. In the beginning of the pandemic, people tend to just kind of ignore the virus and keep the pace of their life, or they just believe that they would not be the unlucky ones. My interview also showed that all the travelers in the hotel I stayed were aware that there is a high possibility for them to get the virus if they travel. But however, they believe that it cannot be them. They taught me that China is so big. China has so many people. How could it be me? Or they say, I didn't hang out with any people who came from Wuhan, or I haven't had traveled to Wuhan recently, so I don't think I will get it. So in other words, there was kind of a delay for the public to come to terms with the fact that the situation was really very serious. And then on December the 23rd, Wuhan was shut down. The shutdown of Wuhan was decisive, not only because it stopped the spread of the virus further in our country, but also, in my opinion, set a very, very strong alert to all the general Chinese people. So people start to think what was happening in Wuhan was something really extraordinary, because shutting down a city of Wuhan size never happened before in Chinese people's living memory. So after Wuhan was shut down, the outbreak of the virus became a national crisis, and then the public finally came to terms with this crisis. After Wuhan was shut down on January the 23rd, many cities followed in the last week. Then traffic in the whole country almost completely stopped. But how could this be possible? Many reports and essays were overwhelmingly focused on the responses of the government. However, from the beginning of the lockdown to the reopening, it was communities in villages which made up the first line of defense in the pandemic prevention. Soon after inter-provincial traffic was restricted, villages and communities started closing up. Emergency meeting was organized in every county level. On January the 26th, the third day of the New Year holidays, all the civil servants were requested to be ready on duty anytime. This includes also my brother, who is working for the local government, and all the members of village committees across the country should also be ready on duty anytime. The village where I supposed to go to do field work had no cases. Neither did the county it belongs to. To prevent clustering infection in families and villagers, according to the meeting the members of the village committee attended in the township taught me that all the villages in the region had to be closed up on January the 27th. Multiple barriers were set up on roads between villages on January the 28th. The following days were marked by erecting more barricades among towns, as well as roads between towns and cities. All the villages across the country were all closed up in the end of January. One of the most important things happening in the villages were actually mobilized on the duty of safeguarding their village gate. In the village I was doing field work, all the households were assigned by the village community to an 8-hour shift to guard the gate of the village. Each guarding crew consisted of 1 or 2 members of the village committee and 3 to 4 villagers. They safeguarded the gate of the village 24 hours a day, which in practice often means that they were playing cards or mahjong or having barbecues just in front of their village gate. No cars or any transportation was allowed to enter the village. In some extreme cases, the villagers would just cut off or block the roads, just as you saw in my previous slides and also this one. Any people who don't officially belong to the village will be blocked at the entrance of the village. What makes the village crucial in protecting itself from widespread of the virus was the fact that village are societies of acquaintances. In the village, people could easily oversee each other. Households were requested by the committee of the village to monitor their neighbors. It was not explicitly stated on official documents, but however, it was concerns among the villagers that it was their own obligation to protect their own village from being infected by the virus. Because this strict travel restriction, visits between villages stopped. Barriers between villages formed the very first and localized borders. Above village level, borders were also erected between towns. The boundaries of towns and counties became their lines of defense. Instead of mobilizing villagers, civil servants were assigned to the crossroads to stop people from traveling across towns. Likewise, the same strategy was deployed in cities and the provincial levels. So in cities, they employed a grid-based management method in all communities. All the residential areas across the country, be it consisting of only like one building with less than 200 people or more than 100 buildings with more than 3 million people, were divided into grids of small zoos. The grid management was actually based on the pre-existing community service and management system. Usually, a community has its own residence committee and has several obligations according to the constitutive law of resettlement communities in urban China. The law was launched in 1990. One of the legal provision which made the committee of communities practical and very efficient during the pandemic was that the community has to assist the people's government or its agency to do a good job in public health, family planning, special care, relief, education, and other work related to the interest of the residents. Grid management made accurate information gathering, people monitoring, medical and life supply distributing possible. So in operation, a grid would consist of several supporting staff and several volunteers during the pandemic. What makes the grid very effective is that it is based on the pre-existing digital infrastructure. Grid management was supported by digital mapping technology. I had a chance to see the grid system last year in the office of the Bureau of Civil Affairs in my hometown when I tried to transfer my house register from Beijing to Gansu, where I grew up. So I saw that all residential buildings in any communities were visualized on the GPS map of the grid system. If one clicks on that building, information of all the households and householders will be available. More specific information such as occupation, telephone number, age, gender, and all the family members of the household will be displayed immediately. Furthermore, the grid system also gathers information of public service, such as the name of the grid member who is in charge of the certain community, and also the name of the party branch of the community, and so on. with the great manager method, strict access control was exercised in the residential compound where my parents are living. A pass was issued by the community manager. So you cannot enter the community without a pass. The community limited the frequency of access of each household. During the height of the pandemic, only one person in every household was allowed to go out every other day with the pass to get groceries. The great management were also obliged to gather the information of all the residents in the resident compound and report the information to its higher level response team, such as the government of the district the community belongs to. Through this great system, material resources were channeled down to the community level and then distributed to families by volunteers. Great management in urban areas and closed villages in countryside. Multiple levels of barriers between towns and cities formed fractal borders in China during the pandemic. To understand what fractal borders are, I used an icon to explain a little bit further. So fractal is a term used mainly in mathematics and geometry. A fractal pattern means that the basic patterns are the same at any scale. They are the same at large macro scale as at small micro scale. The large is revealed by and grows out from the small. The bigger is revealed in the smaller. Here I use a triangle fractal pattern to show how does the fractal borders would look like. But I tried to make something even better, but I don't know how to make. So this is I hope it can explain a little bit what I want to say. So let's just imagine this triangle is China. It has a border. There are also so you can see in the middle. I use this kind of white triangle as a symbol of the cities in China, and they also have their own borders. There are also borders between provinces with lots of towns and countries. So you can see here, like, let's imagine like this is maybe a province, and then inside of the province there are also borders between smaller scale cities, towns, counties, and finally those very little ones who represent villagers. So how would it be like to live inside of those fractal borders? Villagers were not allowed to go out from the village except for very important trips. To live in the village, every entrance or exit of any villages has to be monitored. Furthermore, only going out to local market doesn't require a certificate, as I show here in this slide. Visits to any government agencies, hospitals, or any other public places require a document issued by their natal village or community. So as I show in this photo, two indispensable pieces of information on the documents were: first, it has to show which village or community this person officially belongs to, and secondly, the person hasn't traveled to the places which were categorized as high-risk regions. Under this policy, which only identify documents instead of person, traveling in China, especially in the late stage of the lockdown, became a preparation of series of paperwork. One had first to apply a health certificate from the health center of his or her community, or the health center of his or her village. Another certificate was also necessary because his community or his village has to ensure the authority of the place the person travels to that this person hasn't exposed himself to the virus. So now I would also want to show what happened really from my opinion, even more important, what happened in the real life was that what happened on the cyber space when there were no spaces for people to live in real life. People live in virtual space. It is particularly striking that the villages and communities were marked by unified government-supported policies, while the online spaces were in contrast marked by unified and chaotic rumors, humor, anger, and pride, which challenged and undermined both government narratives and medical responses. With the confirmed cases in Wuhan and other parts of China climbing steadily in late January and early February, rumors and humors and anger engulfed in Chinese social media, while various state-owned news media were publishing emotive stories from the front line in Wuhan about nurses and doctors saving people's lives in a dearth of medical supplies. Chinese people in China and beyond strongly criticized the Chinese government for covering up information and not responding in a timely manner. Chinese people had a unparalleled feeling of anger and pride towards the central government and also the local Hubei government during the crisis. The opinions of Chinese people about their authority, from my opinion, were never as divided as it was during the high days of the pandemic. Critiques and the contest towards the authority were part of the pandemic from the very beginning. So one of the very important thing was rumors spread on the online. When facing an epidemic like this, especially in the very beginning when people actually knew so little about it and the virus is so novel, one of the commonest reaction was that people tried to look for explanations themselves. Rumors and jokes were used by Chinese people on social media to deal with uncertainty. There were three kinds of rumors. One was that about the origin of the virus in the beginning. For example, one of the most circulated one was that the virus was circulated in the was cultivated in the American military base and was spread by the American soldiers to Wuhan when they attended the military ward game held in Wuhan in October. Other rumors were related to how prevent oneself from being infected by the virus, and also how to prevent your family members to be infected by the virus, and also blank humors used by people in a time of crisis as a way of coping. Others use humor as a novel but powerful way of resisting the critiques of the and criticize the official narratives. You can see on the left side of the slide is the jaw that vividly show the overload people who are working in the local government agencies with 4 eyes, 3 mouths, 6 hands, 4 legs, and 4 hearts. And the photo on the right side actually is an essay about an interview made with the woman actually in the picture. You can see she was one of the doctors who warned the government in the beginning after an interview about her. And her experience was censored again and again. Chinese people wrote and rewrote the article with all kinds of icons, emojis, and symbols to avoid censorship. So social media was kind of battlefield among the Chinese conservatives and also kind of Chinese liberals. The the divisiveness of pride and criticism smeared by a series of diaries written by the Wuhan-based novelist Fang Fang from January the 25th to March the 25th. Fang Fang wrote her personal experience, feelings, and interviews with her friends, and observed the and observation, and published on those published her diaries on her Weibo. In the beginning, her diary were followed by millions of Chinese people in documenting life in Wuhan during the COVID-19. Fang Fang touched on many sensitive issues. While many Fang Fang's diary have been censored on various platforms and her Weibo account was temporarily blocked, her diary gained a huge attention. He was criticized by Chinese nationalists for writing about the government in the disapproving way. She was described as the soul of Wuhan, and her diary were prized as the voice of the Chinese people. But in the same time, she was condemned as an irresponsible writer who contaminated the cyber environment of China, while was admired by others for her courage. However, in early April, the attitude of the public towards Fang Fang's diary shifted when the news of her diary will be published in English in the United States and in Deutsch in Germany started to circulate on Chinese social media. Most of her readers who supported her previously when she was attacked by Chinese nationalists turned against her too. She was condemned as a traitor, therefore betraying her own country. It was said that the publication of her diary will only give evidence to the Americans when China was under scrutiny of the U.S. since early March, when the pandemic became a worldwide crisis, especially after United President Donald Trump said that China created the pandemic deliberately and should take responsibility of the pandemic in the U.S. Angry nationalism waved on Chinese social media and government official medias. Fang Fang was condemned as an enemy of the whole country by providing the U.S. with the ammunition to attack China. She was attacked with very violent language on Chinese social media. Her background and personal life was scrutinized. She also received death threats. The debates went so far that it damaged the personal relations among Chinese nationalists who strongly defended their country from being criticized, and those who are more in favor of open debate about the national as well as international problems. So Chinese social media was engulfed by anger as well as pride. The dispute was so fierce that many people was expelled from a WeChat group where they were the rebels. Family members, fathers and sons will also fight with each other. It also said that couples got divorced because they had completely opposite opinions on Fang Fang's diary. So the last stage of the pandemic in China was that the digital tracking system. So if preventing the spread of the virus depended on strict quarantine measurement, then the opening up relied on the support of big tech and big data. Before the opening up, the commerce giant Alibaba developed an Alipay house code. The house QR code was employed in the city of Hangzhou, where the Alibaba is based, to track people in real time whether they pose a contagion risk or not. The house code was rolled out nationwide soon in mid-February. While the euthanizing of the house QR code was condemned overseas as the spread of the mass surveillance in China, I mean, on the other hand, it helped to identify people who potentially were exposed to risk. What made the employment of the QR code possible was the digital infrastructure developed actually long before this pandemic, namely the authorization of phone number with real names and ID numbers. The campaign started actually in September 2013. 2 years later, all Chinese people were authorized with the users' real names. This also facilitated by the ID-based train ticket booking system and ID-based bus ticket booking system and the ID-based flight ticket booking system. So it is not really very difficult to realize that all travels with public transportation are collected to phone number, thus to one's ID. And then with this house QR code, then they can the authority can just track anybody who had to travel during the pandemic. So the QR code was sticked outside of the airport, as you can see from here, and also you have to scan this code before you board, and then different premises had their own QR code. So this is true. I had when I traveled from Yunnan to Gansu. So luckily I was green. So they have 3 different kinds of colors. So if you are green, it means that you are safe. Then they will let you pass. And then if you are yellow, it means that you probably has already been exposed in a risk situation. And if you are red, then it means that that you really have to quarantine yourself again. But luckily I only got this green pass, so that now I'm in Germany. So I think I will stop here, and thank you for your time and attention, and any questions or suggestions or comments are all much welcomed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ma, for your talk. I think there are many interesting issues. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, good. Can you all hear me? I hope. Well, you raised so many interesting issues from the timetable that is quite different from the one we received, starting from December 27th. And I underline that from December 27 to January the 23rd, when Wuhan was locked down, many things happened, included report to the WHO in January 11. January 25, the USA closed its embassy in Wuhan. And so there are many questions that are addressed also to us. What did we do all this time, considering that the epidemia, the pandemic problem in the USA started the first week of March? The second issue that I want to underline is how complex was the debate in China. You use a very efficacious expressions. The one that I found in normal language, the battlefield of knowledge. You usually talk about the battlefield of Chinese nationalism. And it is interesting how this reaction, defensive reaction by many people in the media, in the social media, developed and had a chance to get expressed. But the most interesting thing that you mentioned, and I wrote it down while you were talking, is at one point you say something of this sort: you say that in the from the beginning of the lockdown down to the reopening, it was communities and villages which made up the first line of defense in epidemic prevention. So I open the floor of the question, just asking you this question: how did it work out? How did community and villages made the first line of defense in epidemic prevention? And I ask the people who want to raise a question to make a reservation in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and question. I think I start with your question first. I think I mentioned in my talk that villages and the communities are really very important during the prevention of the pandemic, because literally anybody in China, you neither belong a village or belong a community. So if they close the village or the community, then basically you cannot cross any kind of borders of towns or cities. So I was actually, I would love to share my experience, because I was stuck in a hotel because they closed the village, and then I was staying in a hotel in Jinhong, Xishuangbanna, and the hotel was kind of in the village inside the city, and then just get out from the village was impossible. So even if there was there were no borders between cities or towns, if all the communities and villages were closed up, then all the travels in China would be already stopped. So that is my point. And another very important thing I also mentioned in when I addressed the grid management system in urban areas, because this grid management in Chinese we call 网格化管理 has also a very long history, because like maybe I really didn't had enough information when Chinese government started to build this grid system. And when I saw that system in the office, I was so surprised, because they had basically all the information they need, like the name and occupation, everything of the residents, so they can exactly know which family has a very vulnerable people who needs help, or who traveled outside the city or their province, and who already returned, so on and so forth. So this grid system enables the so-called the grid members working in those systems to very accurately to gathering information, and then follow people, and then also deliver food and other materials to every family. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Roberto, may I ask a question to Dr. Zhen?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Your talk was extremely interesting, because it showed us the very different attitude of your government in controlling the movements within the country, and the compliance of the people to this kind of very invasive form of survey of what goes on. No, it's very it's frankly much higher than here in our Western countries, where we all feel very much how to say, oppressed by the possibility of having such a capillary control on our lives, on our displacement, and so on. And I wanted to ask you something about the how to say, how diffuse is this nationalist feeling that you talked to us about? The title of the part of your speech where you talked about the pride and the anger, I suppose that it might be a quotation of a famous book from an Italian journalist, Oriana Fallaci, who wrote it some years ago after the September the 11th, 2001. And it was a terrible sort of racist attack towards immigrants, against Arab immigrants. And it was a sort of outcry from the very identity of Italian nationalism against the invasion, contamination, violence, and misuse by foreigners of our country. And so it is indeed the problem of the COVID, the problem of the pandemic. It's problem because it is used as an argument in the political arena. And so I was wondering how much this feeling that may raise anger and nationalist reactions, of pride and of attack, that may give rise to rumors like the one that it was the Americans who spread it from their base in some part of China. How widespread is it? How much throughout the different social classes or different areas in the country have been, have been touched and interested by this kind of discourse, of rhetoric, of nationalist rhetoric? Because in Italy, we have a very, ineffective covering from the press, from the media, of what occurs within different countries, and we certainly did not have any local evidence of what went on outside what the Chinese government said. So for us, it is interesting to see how in different areas and in different levels of Chinese society, reactions could occur. I don't know if my question is clear, but I'll shut up my microphone and listen to your answer.
Thank you, Professor Loop. It's a very interesting question. I try to respond it according to what I understand your question. So I think the nationalists really intrigued by this COVID-19. In my opinion, is even more important that the spread of the virus itself, because I believe the virus and the disease will be subsided eventually, but this kind of nationalism and stigma and also discrimination, I feel like it will remain even if we had a vaccine and then the disease will eventually gone. So this kind of Chinese nationalist was actually already was there before this coronavirus, because of the trade war between China and the US. And then that kind of, I feel like it happened in China, especially on social media, was very important because as I also mentioned in my talk, that for the general Chinese public, so first they kind of just ignore the threat of the virus and go on with their own life, and then second, they trust the government's measure, and then we also found lots of corruption and also the covering of the information, and also kind of I'd say, because you exposed to that kind of tragedy information every day, you got very, very angry about the government, especially in the very beginning, how they responded to the virus. And then when the situation in China gets better, and also because the propaganda and all kinds of state-run media show that whole those 2 hospitals were built like in 10 days by all the Chinese people, and then also they built lots of temporary healthcare centers in Wuhan, and then many people were actually got treated by the government. And then the how to say, the feeling of the Chinese public towards our government got a little bit kind of positive, and then it came to the U.S. The situation U.S. was getting worse and worse, and then the president of the United States actually kind of, I mean, feels like kind of insulted Chinese people. See that China didn't handle with the virus very well in the beginning, and then we have to, Chinese government have to take responsibility of the loss, especially economic loss of the United States. So I feel like this kind of how to say, criticized, provoked in Chinese social media, especially by kind of all negative reports and scurrility in US and also other Western mainstream media. And I feel like this kind of criticize upset Chinese people because according to the conversations and interviews I made with my friends, because we always have a kind of different opinions on this, whether we should criticize our government or whether it is right to have that kind of pride feeling after such tragedy happened in China. And according to my friends, they feel like, you know, Chinese people deserve at least a little bit credit after, you know, we sacrificed sorry, I should say I don't know, they sacrificed literally almost everything during the 1.5 months lockdown. So and also in early April, when the situation in the US got very critical, it was also at that point that Chinese people also started to have a sense of triumph like ever before. And also many Chinese people kind of started to realize that a country like US, a country that we have admired for and yeared for a long time, actually doesn't have a very good or functional health insurance system. And while all the patients and Chinese people actually were tested and treated for totally free in China. So this kind of nationalism feeling is for me is kind of almost anti-American nationalism, and this kind of nationalism is also kind of a mixed feeling of treated unfair, and also kind of also hurt by this kind of very also nationalist narrative from the US. And how should I put it? Yeah, I think yeah, especially I feel like during this COVID-19, especially this kind of nationalist was also very kind of widespread to the people like my mother who doesn't really read any kind of reports or articles because of the widespread or how to say the very popular Douyin and Kuaishou, which are Chinese YouTubes. So the videos of US and also other countries' situation was circulated on this kind of videos video platforms. So really Chinese farmers or Chinese people who really didn't care about what was really happening outside China started to pay attention about what was happening in China, and then this kind of nationalist feeling was really kind of, from my opinion, is kind of from bottom up, kind of really they feel like they really have to have a voice in this kind of national kind of debate, who really have to take a responsibility of this pandemic. Yeah, I hope I answer your question. And
yes, Dr. Zhen, you did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. Are there other questions?
There is one in the chat, Roberto.
Yes, but I don't precisely understand what does that
How can I see
you
the
have mentioned about in the web and the famous diaries? Can you read it? Yes, please.
I can
Please.
ask live.
Please.
the
Please do it.
diary. Okay.
So you talked about some form of opposition that you have seen in the web, for example, and in these diaries that were published. Were there some other forms of opposition, like internal opposition to this lockdown, this very strict lockdown, for instance, to the controls in the villages?
Yeah, of course. I mean, especially in the beginning, like when they completely shut down all the villages and the communities, especially in some areas, they block the roads, and for many people who run business, like I also read news like factories who raise chickens, and many of their chicken died, and also. During those reopening periods, like people have really to have a very have a smartphone to be able to scan this house QR code, and this is kind of not really this is kind of block the old people out, because old people really don't use these smartphones. And in terms of and also many problems happen, like some people really had to travel to another city and also towns. It was totally forbidden as kind of like one stand lockdown, caused lots of problems. But then from the narrative of the Chinese people, and many of them, I mean, according to my conversation and interviews with my relatives and friends, they feel like, this is a sacrifice you have to take. Because I feel like for Chinese people, when we think about a crisis like this, we don't think about our individuals. Like we don't think whether I have a freedom to travel a lot, or I have to or I'm housing a lot. We think about, especially as a family, like we would think, okay, I would stay at home, and then to be able to protect my family members to be infected. And also this kind of collective thinking also implied to the even larger scale, like a shock, the lockdown of a village or lockdown of the community. But I agree with you that during those lockdowns, many people, especially Chinese elites and Chinese scholars and intellectuals, many of them, I mean, include me, because I tried to get out from that hotel and to be able to travel. We kind of expressed our disagreement on this lockdown. Another issue was the diary. I actually didn't really understand your question. So you were asking whether inside China people have different opinions on this diary, or you?
No. I was asking if there were other kind of opposition, and you have answered, I think. With this.
Yeah. Especially, I think this kind of opposition still exists and happening and debating in China, because now in China, if you want to go to a hospital, whatever kind of issues you have to get a coronavirus test. So this caused lots of problems for people who have really very emergent situation, like they have to have a check-up or kind of surgery very quickly, and people still kind of criticize and debate and how do we deal with this kind of situation. So there are all kinds of oppositions. So I just show the part that I collected and I see. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very
Thank you.
interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have now a question by Professor Pino Schiripa from the University of Rome. Pino, please go ahead.
Okay, let me just. Okay, now I have also video. No, thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting also because the light of the complexity of China situation. Normally the information we have are quite limited, so we have a different idea about the complexity in China. No, I think that for certain extent, China was also like a model for other countries, even for Italy, about the lockdown and so on. And I saw some similarities also in the response of the people in what you said. But you said something that I would like to better understand, because you referred to the social rumors. And it was very common here in Italy, but especially they were spread by the social media, for instance, Facebook and so on. And I don't think it is the case of China. So I would like to better understand how these rumors spread in the country.
Thank you. So I think, especially I think for people, Westerners, I know this is Westerner is not a very good term to use, but I cannot find another term to use. So for Westerners, China is a really very heavy censored country, and for many of you, I think it's very difficult also to imagine how the circulation of information or rumors or humors or whatever will circulate in Chinese social media. But I know that in the beginning of the pandemic, especially this virus was so novel, and people so many people infected just in very short time, so people kind of panicked. And then I think this is very common that people started to look for explanations by themselves, and then also kind of facilitated by this kind of nationalist feeling that rumors spread on the social on Chinese media that where the virus is, and also there are also rumors about the origin of the virus, saying that it was created in the Wuhan virology institution, and then the head of the institute had to give a kind of
Jan, excuse me, we cannot hear you. Probably you touched your microphone or something else happened. We can't hear you. Try and talk. Say something.
How about now?
Okay, now fine.
Okay, thank you. So those rumors, we still don't know who created those rumors, but some of them were very professional. They even wrote articles about how the virus leaked out from the Wuhan virology institute, and then the head of the institute had to
Jan, the same thing happened. We can't hear you. Hello, try and say something. No, we don't hear you.
well now.
Okay, now yes.
Okay, so the head of the institute had to give a public kind of announcement that they didn't cultivate this virus in their lab, and also rumors about how to prevent yourself to be infected and what kind of medicines or what kind of things you have to eat to be able to keep healthy. But from my observation, that this kind of rumors always had a purpose. For example, I know lots of tea businessmen because I did my PhD on tea. So many of my tea business people, they said that you have to drink lots of tea because there are lots of scientific evidence to show that if you drink tea, then the virus will go away. The virus will not infect you. And also there, so I feel like to create these kind of rumors, they have a kind of intention to create maybe more economic or business opportunities, and also other kinds of rumors. I don't know, even some of the rumors created in the city I was staying, that there were women who were infected in their hospital, and then she sneaked out from the hospital and tried to infect everybody in the city. So I feel like to some rumors, they have a purpose, like to do something, and other rumors, I don't know, I feel like there were no purpose at all. And then there were so many rumors spread on the social media, and then Chinese officials had to create a platform specifically for dispel those rumors. Yeah, that's my answer. I don't know whether I answered your question or not. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Fine. Something else? Well, let me ask you a final question then. In Sichuan Bana, that is a small town to Chinese standards.
Yes. Very small. In China.
Not to European standards and not to Italian standards, of course.
Yeah.
But how did the health system react to the problem?
Sorry, what? Sorry.
How did the health system as a whole dealt with the problem?
Oh, health system.
Yes, very, very, very quickly, because it is difficult to have an idea of the articulation of the health system response to the pandemic.
So in the beginning, especially during the New Year vacation, because all the factories were not open, so we have a dearth of medical supplies, and another issue was that from my friends who are working in hospitals, the main problems for the local healthcare and doctors and many also nurses, because was that they actually didn't know how to deal with this kind of very contagious virus. Like one of my friends taught me that that they don't know how to put on that kind of how to say the suit, and then how to take them off. So many of those nurses, like they were chosen by their department or hospitals to send to Wuhan, or have to be on duty in their specific department to deal with this virus, and they never got any kind of professional training before this. So the very difficult thing for them was get proper knowledge, professional knowledge to deal with this virus. And for the local hospitals, people just stopped to go to hospitals, because we all kind of aware that hospitals are kind of very dangerous places. So if you have other health issues, you just stay at home and wait for the virus kind of subsides. subsides. Yeah, basically, that's how they reacted to respond to the virus from a local level hospital.
Okay, fine. If oh yes, there is a new question from, I don't know who wrote this, but you can ask the question. Oh, it's you. I can see your name on the question. Okay, fine.
Don't worry. Dr. Zhen, you already mentioned the fact that there were some traces of the past experience of the kind of viruses that that now are affecting the China population. So I'm wondering, can you tell us something about the fact that the coronavirus, you already had an experience, and it was very well managed before some years ago. It didn't become a pandemic. So people in a certain way were already prepared. This, do you think that this has had some effects on the kind of response people had on the kind of measures to protect from the spread of the COVID-19? Do you think that this made the compliance higher for Chinese people, Chinese citizens, from this experience?
So we had the SARS crisis in 2003. So when we had SARS, I was in, I think, in middle school. So I had that kind of memory, but SARS didn't reach to many places in China. I remember our teachers would disinfect our classroom every day, but beyond that, I didn't have many lots of memories about that. So SARS was really, you are right, because SARS was really basically in Beijing, and I feel like the experience of SARS helped the Chinese authority dealt with the virus, not really very in the beginning, but when the infected cases were really very high, like they started to convert lots of public spaces like stadiums or other kind of really very large spaces into temporary hospitals, and they also lent how to say so during the SARS crisis, they also built one hospital very fast and transferred all the patients there. But so after SARS, the Chinese government created an independent system we called how to say direct epidemic and direct report system. But then the tricky thing for me and also for many Chinese people now is that we actually didn't know this direct epidemic or virus report system worked a lot, because according to the central government, saying that the local Wuhan government and the Wuhan disease control center didn't report the cases very early in the outbreak, but according to other analyses, that actually this system did happen, but because the virus was so novel, and then both the central government and also the Wuhan local government trying to understand what the virus is, so they kind of keep the information in a very small circle only between the authorities. So I feel like for the general public, I think after the experience of SARS, we kind of have, especially those reviews made with the survivors of SARS. So the general public have a kind of feeling to know that this can kill you. this is a really very serious issue. You cannot really like just ignore this and have a normal life. So when the government issued the completely national lockdown, then everybody just obeyed. Like, not, I mean, that's a little bit extreme, but many people choose to stay at home, even if before the national lockdown. So I feel like after this experience, Chinese people kind of afraid of that kind of pandemic happening again. But from the official level, I think it also happened a little bit, like just I mentioned, they built the health system, and they also learned how to separate different areas in the hospital to deal with this kind of very contaminated virus. But in the very beginning, I think it didn't really happen that much. That's why so many Chinese people were really very angry in the beginning about how the government responded to this virus. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
And I guess I should give the floor to the president of the Italian Society of Medical Anthropology to say a few final words to thank you and to say goodbye to all the guests who joined this session. So,
if there are no more questions, and certainly we can thank Zhen for her very kind presence and effort to give us this overview of what was happening in China from her point of view. We have been very pleased to host you and to listen to your excellent presentation. And I just wanted to tell our public that the entire seminar will be probably accessible on our site within the next 2 days. And one last information, which is completely new, because we just decided last week that we cannot have our Congress. We were looking forward to having a national Congress in September, but as things are going on in a very, in a very impossible to preview what's going to happen. So we had to cancel the Congress in presence, but we decided that the various sessions of our Congress will take place in the internet, and we'll have a seminar throughout the year. So we'll start at the end of September, and we'll try to keep having this kind of meetings every week or every fortnight, so that people can discuss, can listen to what some of us have to say on the different topics that were scheduled for the next Congress. And so I think that by the end of September, we'll keep having other meetings going on for the Italian Association of Social Anthropology, and we probably will have other news about the outcomes of this seminar. For the moment, we thank everybody for being with us. We especially thank everybody from the different countries that have given us their advice, the knowledge. And some of them have followed all of our seminar throughout the 12 meetings. Carla Braga, for example, from Mozambique, is with us tonight, and I'm very pleased to say goodbye to her. And we hope to have all of you with us again in the future. Dr. Zhen, it was a great pleasure to have you with us at the very end of our seminar. It was very interesting to listen to you from such a enormous and so complex country like China. No, it's a whole continent, and it was not easy to imagine how things would have been possible to describe for you. You found a way that was quite clear and very interesting, and so thank you, everybody, and let's hope to meet personally, either in Italy or in Germany or in China or in other places in the future. and to share our experience. And let's hope that COVID-19 leave us in peace for the future. Goodbye, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of
Thank you.
for your time.
Roberto Beneduce now can thank you, Carla, and thank you, everybody. And we can now leave the floor and finish our seminar. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, and have a
Thank
nice
you.
summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Dr. Zhen.
Bye-bye. I haven't figured out how could I leave this
You must click on the icon to the right, the red one, twice, and then it says abandon the reunion, the meeting.
why I cannot find it. Never mind.
If you move the mouse.
You can no. Why? No. No. Why? I cannot find where I can.
If you
Forever.
move your mouse, then you have 7 icons. The one to the right, the red one.
Here it's here. I think because
Yes.
I'm sharing the
Could you find it?
the PowerPoint. I found it. I found it. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah,
have a good time.
Have a nice summer vacation.
You too.
Bye
Enjoy.
bye.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.